Today on Go Island, we are back at the Nanaimo Museum. This time it's to look at a collection of Johnny Cash memorabilia that was found in a locker right here in Nanaimo. Today on Go Island, reason to celebrate at Songhees Nation near Victoria. Can Todd and Derek meet the challenge and bake an asparagus quiche with your island chef? That and more today on Go. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4, and today we are back at the Nanaimo Museum looking at an exhibit here that came from a locker of Johnny Cash memorabilia that was found right here in Nanaimo. That inspired a movie by local filmmaker Jonathan Holliff. It's called My Father and the Man in Black, and we're going to be looking at some of the items here later on this edition of Go Island. But first, we're throwing things down to Victoria. Sucheta Singh looks at a new building that will not only be a place of resources for the Songhees Nation, but also for people living in the community that surrounds that. Here is Sucheta Singh. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4, and we are here in the Nanaimo Museum with film writer, director, and producer Jonathan Holliff. It's a documentary called My Father and the Man in Black, and we'll talk a little bit more about the content of that film later in this episode. But first, all of this stuff that is here, plus more that isn't here, was found in a locker right here in Nanaimo.
That's true. It was a locker my father had kept kind of on the move, but when he retired to Nanaimo, he moved all of this stuff apparently into this storage locker, and it turned out to be a bonanza of Cash memorabilia that he had kept stored since he quit Johnny Cash as his manager in 1973. Okay. And after my father committed suicide in 2005, and I had come home to help my mother deal with his belongings, I discovered it quite by accident, and it was quite a surprise.
What were you thinking you'd find? And thank you for putting that in context, because your father did manage Johnny Cash for most of his career, which is how he came to have all of these things. But when you opened that locker door, what did you think you were going to find?
Well, I certainly didn't expect to find a bunch of gold records and very rare Cash memorabilia. My father had been Johnny's manager more than 30 years before. I had no reason to expect to find anything like that. What I was looking for, on the other hand, was just information about my father in general, because we had been estranged for 20 years.
Right, and a man you didn't really know.
Exactly, yeah. And when my mother told me about this locker, my first reaction was, no way, I'm not going to wade into my father's life. I was quite happy practicing denial. But my mother recognized that I was kind of in trouble after the suicide, and she said, maybe you'll find something about your father that will bring you some peace of mind. And she was right.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on as we get into how the film is much more than a look back at the career of Johnny Cash and his manager, and the relationship that Jonathan and you had with your father. What's this? This is something you found in the locker, the award.
This is actually the first Juno Award before when they changed their name the very next year. They used to be called the RPM Awards, and that was awarded to my father in 1969 as Outstanding Music Industry Personality of that year. And this piece of paper, handwriting? This is kind of cool. It's surprising when you look at this SAG contract for Johnny Cash starring in the crime drama of 1960, 5 Minutes to Live, that he was paid only $350 a week. So that's representative of the kinds of very interesting things we found in the locker.
And these are things that people haven't seen before.
No, not at all. In fact, well, we'll come around to the picture of the on the other side here, but moving on in this direction. This is you? Yeah, this is me and Johnny and Saul right over here in black and white on the set of an Imperial Oil commercial in Nashville.
Have you ever seen that commercial?
I've never seen the commercial, but
now we got to find that.
We've got to find that. But I found the photograph so interesting because Johnny is in sort of half light, and Saul's, I mean, if this was a professional photographer, he'd probably be fired, but it just is powerful to me because here are the two men who were of such great influence to me as a child, and my father's more out of the light than Johnny is in that photograph. And of course, this photograph here, my father was the first to bring rock and roll to Canada, and this is a photo of he and Bill Haley, of Bill Haley and his Comets. who were reputed to have recorded the first rock and roll song. And those of you who watched Happy Days know it as the theme song, Rock Around the Clock.
Okay, we're going to look more at some stuff. I'm going to cut you off. We're going long. Both of us like to talk, and it's a fabulous story to tell. We'll look into more the film My Father and the Man in Black, which is premiering in Nanaimo on March the 20th at the Port Theatre, 7 o'clock. There's still a few tickets left. You can pick them up by contacting the Port Theatre. We're going to throw things over now to Todd Jones. It's our second edition of Clocked, and I don't think I stump him in this one. If you think you can stump Todd and Derek in a future edition of Clocked, you can send me your clues, kate.bergen@sjrb.ca. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4, and today we're talking about the documentary My Father and the Man in Black that plays at the Port Theatre on March the 20th. We'll be back with more on that after a short break. Still ahead today on Go Island, Dan Kahn talks homelessness on the streets of Victoria and in the kitchen with your island chef, asparagus bacon quiche. That and more still ahead today on Go. You are watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4, and we're back here at the Nanaimo Museum, this time looking at an exhibit of Johnny Cash memorabilia. It is in anticipation of Nanaimo's first screening of the documentary My Father and the Man in Black. All of the stuff that you see here, which you can come down in person to check out yourself until early April, was found in a storage locker right here in Nanaimo, and we're going to talk about how that was the launching pad for a documentary film that is touring film circuits around the world. We're going to throw things over now to Dan Kahn in Victoria. His latest Talk to Me edition is all about homelessness. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. We're here talking about the film My Father and the Man in Black. It plays here in Nanaimo at the Port Theatre on March the 20th. Writer, director, and producer Jonathan Holliff is here. And this is a scrapbook that you found in a locker in Nanaimo that was put together by your father. A lot of items from Johnny Cash's life that people have never seen before. We're going to touch briefly on one of those. It's this
picture,
photo.
yes. Well, most of these photos here have never been published. People would certainly recognize this one from Folsom, but this one has been assessed as being the most valuable photograph ever taken of Johnny Cash.
Why?
That's the question. It's a mugshot, and it was taken in 1966, November, at Folsom Prison, the first time Johnny and Saul went to Folsom, rather than 68 when he recorded that live record, that seminal record. What happened was he'd recently been arrested for smuggling drugs, and the prison guard said, "Hey, Cash, Mr. Bad Boy, how about sitting for a mugshot?" And when I gave a copy of this to the warden at Folsom Prison when I was there to shoot the movie, his jaw dropped, and he said that, to his knowledge, Cash is the only private citizen ever to sit for a mugshot at a maximum security prison.
And even Cash's estate doesn't have
No, the Cash family has never seen this. They don't have a copy of it. Saul squirreled it away 35 years ago.
Okay, now you keep mentioning Saul. Saul Holliff was your father.
Correct.
He committed suicide in Nanaimo in 2005, and you two had been estranged for 20 years. But we're going to start at the beginning, which is your birth.
Oh my God.
We're going to start at the beginning in less than 2 minutes, right? But this is how your father announced your birth, in full showbiz flavor. And
yeah, this really blew me away when I found it after my father's death, for a couple of reasons. One, it's a telegram from my father to Cash on the occasion of my birth, but also because of how he wrote it. He wrote it as a promoter would write. You know, come and see Jonathan weighing in at such and such a room, no lights, mics, or extra talent required. Don't you dare miss him, as if he were pitching a show. But then it got even crazier. He put it in the local newspaper in an ad saying that he and my mother together proudly present this baby. And then it says, Jonathan hopes you'll all come to see his daddy's shows because his daddy needs the money.
Now.
So I found this very fascinating.
And one of the things you've mentioned, and I think it came out in the film that I have seen a couple of times now, is that your father tried to manage you as well. And he wasn't really in your life on a day-to-day basis as a father-son would maybe typically be. And that's a thread. I mean, the movie's about Johnny Cash, yes, but it's about relationships between fathers and sons.
It is. I mean, when you think about it, Saul's contemporaries, Colonel Tom Parker with Elvis or Brian Epstein with the Beatles, compared to his counterparts, he was managing the unmanageable. So along comes two baby boys, and I think my father thought that, you know, maybe he could exert some control over me and manage my upbringing. Whenever
and you rebelled, I'm sure.
Oh, I rebelled much like Cash did, and ended up leaving home, and he and I had a very difficult relationship for many years. But yeah, there is that parallel, that thread in the film, and it's something interesting and something that other people pointed out to me. I didn't clue into it until someone said, you know, there's something weird going on between this dynamic.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to be hosting a question and answer period with Jonathan after the showing of the film on March the 20th. You'll have an opportunity to ask your own questions about anything that comes up for you while watching the movie, and you can get your tickets at the Port Theatre. For that, I'm happy to be moderating that Q&A session at the Port Theatre. We're going to throw things over now to our island chef. Here's Michael Williams. We're out of time for this edition of Go Island. A final mention, I'll be moderating a question and answer session with local director, producer, and writer Jonathan Holliff. It's My Father and the Man in Black on Wednesday, March the 20th at the Port Theatre. And before the screening of the film, there will be a performance by David James and Big River, a tribute to Johnny Cash. We'll see you there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Shaw TV.